Hello and welcome to the second season of AUA Focus Series, a podcast channel by AUA Media Lab. And I am Sergey Tantushyan, Professor of Business Communication and Business Strategy. And I have Petra Holm as my guest today, who's the advisor for digital transformation at e-Estonia.
Thank you. And very happy to be here.
Welcome. And let's start. I mean, what Estonia did is really amazing. I was doing some research and trying to understand why and how did it happen, etc. And I know that you have all the answers to this. And just to give our listeners some understanding of why Estonia is such an interesting success case is, or what makes Estonia so successful is the results that Estonia has recorded. For example, it has been referred to multiple times as the most digitalized country in the world, or per capita, you have the biggest number of unicorn startups.
In Europe. Whereas Israel still has twice as many. Very hard to compete with them. But yes, in Europe we have this. There's a funny saying about Estonia always winning per capita. So we're a small country. So because per capita we have good numbers.
So I'm sure it has been a journey. And I would want you, if you could, to introduce us to the journey itself, to the details, to the difficulties. So let's start with the history. How did it happen?
Yeah, I love talking about the history because it all started in 1991 when the Soviet Union finally collapsed and we got the country back. You know, the country that needed to be rebuilt, just like any other post-Soviet country. Of course, we don't like that term anymore. None of us do, but factually it is correct, right? So we needed to rebuild the country with absolutely no resources for that process. There are no people in Estonia. Used to be 1.7 million people. Then we joined the European Union and half the people left, right? So it's 1.3 million people now. And we had no money. Our budget was, well, it's actually quite an overstatement, even called a budget. We had really, really little money. But we had we were full of hope and desire to build a country for the people. Now, we also got lucky, really, in terms of timing, because we got our independence back in the 1990s when the internet was starting to penetrate different societies. There was no internet in Estonia. We couldn't afford computers. They were too expensive. You know, generally speaking, Estonians were digitally illiterate in the 1990s. But the internet was available. New technologies were available. And we also had been building computers for the entire Soviet Union from the Cybernetics Institute since the 1960s. So there was a handful of people with very deep expertise in the area. And we had these leaders who were fairly young and ambitious and patriotic and were not afraid of making very bold decisions, sometimes politically suicidal, but, you know, it was for the good of the country. And, we combined this expertise, this vision, and our desire to build a country that is democratic, that is transparent, that empowers people. And, 35 years later, we're there.
Sure. So this is about, I think, about the economic development of the country, which is pretty much, I think, everybody wanted to do this in the post-Soviet, among the post-Soviet countries. But there was a choice that Estonia made to focus on the digital aspect of the development. And that also is a political decision. And it also, I think, comes from several leaders, maybe preference or motivation, etc. So, I mean, one country, a small country lacking resources, etc., can become a country that is like a logistical hub, for example, or another one could decide to go for one other or focus or develop in other comparative advantage. Okay, so I mean, for smaller countries, we have to invent those comparative advantages, I guess. But again, it's a matter of choice, cooperation, maybe an ally, etc. So what was the reason that Estonia chose the digital aspect of the development?
On the one hand, it was a clearly pragmatic decision. So we were rebuilding the country. We were rebuilding the governance system. So if we're going to rebuild it, we might as well use more efficient tools. So it kind of makes sense to use new technologies rather than old technologies, since we're building from scratch anyway. And then, of course, you're right. Someone had to suggest that idea. Now, we had quite a lot of people coming back to Estonia who had, moved abroad, maybe second, third generation Estonians, who were coming back and who were importing these ideas, who had been exposed to technology where, in places where they lived before. So it was a movement, kind of, you could say, and it made sense, but someone was able to obviously sell that idea, but people also had to buy it. So in that sense, it's just a perfect storm that created this wonderful outcome, but that was just the beginning, right? There was a lot of processes that went into it. We made a lot of mistakes along the way, but for the most part, we learned from them. Sometimes we joke about the mistakes that we made. So we kind of created a blueprint in a sense of how digital transformation is possible. Again, I suppose in case of Estonia, we had it. I mean, I don't want to put it this way, but it kind of helped us that we were rebuilding the country. We had no legacy systems. Not that, being subjected to 50 years of Soviet occupation is an experience that we recommend. So just so that you get rid of your legacy systems and get a chance to rebuild. That's one way to do it. We believe it's possible to also embrace new technologies and new ways of doing things without subjecting yourself to 50 years of Soviet occupation. Not an experience we recommend. So, yes, it's a pragmatic decision, and it was perfect timing, lots of different components.
Got it. I think it's a very common model or common situation that can be observed if there is nothing and, the country can leapfrog all the heritage or previous versions of this, progressive tool or technology, etc., and start from the very advanced one. And what example I remember, I was teaching at the People's Democratic Republic of Laos and business communication. So I'm teaching, the public there on how to use emails, what are the ethical rules of writing an email to CC somebody, to BCC, and how to sign, all those technical things, and also the structure, the visual appeal, etc. And people are just looking at me, and I understand that there's something wrong. They don't understand. I mean, it's irrelevant to them. And I'm like, is there anything that I can, I said wrong or is it not relevant, etc. They're like, we're not using emails. There are no emails that are used on the government level, on the academic level. And I was really surprised. And they said, it's WhatsApp. It's all the messengers, because we kind of, skipped that part, because when email was just this, very big innovation in the world, it wasn't available. It wasn't relevant to them. And then, they jumped over emails and right into the messengers.
How interesting.
Which was interesting. Also, the banking cards. In some countries, the cards are really not like the physical cards. They have never seen them, because the QRs and the payment system and all of this, again, in fintech innovations are kind of over the technologically better, and they are making those old things outdated and completely not usable.
Yeah, we only skipped faxes.
Yeah.
And checkbooks.
So to my point is that, yes, I mean, probably, of course, why there was emptiness is a sad story, but it was kind of good, I guess, for starting something with huge motivation. And so I understand that.
We also needed a way to sort of reinvent ourselves, a country with such limited potential to establish itself geopolitically, a very, very small country, very small land size, and not enough natural resources. We had to think of something that would make us stand out. And then, this this was proposed, and it kind of makes sense.
So you said not only it is enough to do something, but also to have people buy it or to have people join the initiative. So you had to persuade people. So very interested in this human side of change. And, before this podcast, we had this conversation and you said that digital transformation is pretty much a change management, and it's like all change is human. And there is a huge human side of change, and which holds its predictabilities, but also difficulties, and more difficulties, I would say, because people are, as we spoke about that too, are irrational, and you really, should know how to manage and how to motivate, how to change their behavior, and still it's unpredictable. So, what was the human side of that change?
That's a very good question. It's very multifaceted. So I like to think of change as actually the only constant in Estonia. I don't know if you can relate to that, because in a sense we do have a very similar experience, Estonia and Armenia, but maybe we approach it differently. Everything has always been changing. Now, since the 1990s, the change was more for like the positive or like for the better. And that's why people were more likely to embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
It was also quite apparent to the people that if we want to progress as society, if we want to be sort of like face westwards, right? If we want to achieve that level of quality of life that we saw on TV, we would have to learn new ways of living. Mm-hmm. So people were not... I don't want to generalize. Obviously, there were some people who were struggling with change, but it was obvious that old ways were the Soviet ways, and they didn't get us very far. In fact, we wanted to get rid of them because we have quite this, allergy towards those things. And it was obvious that we would need to learn certain new skills. Now, the government made it fairly easy for us to learn these new things. And we popularized technology and learning computers and that kind of stuff, created a type of movement where people were happy to get on board or at least try, because, we provided free computer classes for any adult in this country, in addition to obviously the kids who were taking computer classes in schools. So everyone was trying to become part of it. If it hadn't been followed by, citizen-centric design of services and accessible services that everyone could take part of, if the private sector hadn't played a significant role in all of that, the situation could have been, it could have played out very differently. But again, you have to get lucky, mm-hmm. To get somewhere. And I think we got there.
Mm-hmm. So again, we were speaking, and you said, and I was bringing this example of me filing my tax returns today, and I said that I was struggling. I mean, it was very difficult. Maybe I'm this old generation, not very computer literate, but although, I mean, it's not that bad. But I think it's more of the system that is not user-friendly and is not helping. So you said, customers or citizen-centric approach. So what did that play a huge role in, or any role in the digital transformation? Was it made user experience-wise easy for people? Was it self-explanatory? That's why people jumped on board. Or was it like the benefit that you showed to them, as you said, look, here is what you can do, here's where you can reach, and and that kind of created the motivation, struggling through a not very useful, user-friendly system. What was it?
I don't think we learned how to create truly user-friendly services until fairly lately, mm-hmm. because it takes experience. So you start from what you can produce. Now, actually, our approach is rather agile, mm-hmm. meaning you put something together, you put it out to the people, you collect feedback, you improve, kind of like startups mm-hmm. operate. Mm-hmm. Because then you can address particularly the issues that people bring up. You don't have to try to solve a problem that you imagine people have. You can actually listen to the people who will tell you what the problem is. So, and then, through this process, you become better and better and better. But the idea was always to serve the people, to make it easier for the people to consume services and for the civil servants to produce services, because really we don't even have enough civil servants in the population of 1.3 million people, right? We want to save time and money because those are the two things that we don't have enough of. But forcing people to use these services, I mean, the stick method is not going to work. We made the people made it compulsory for the people to have the EID with which they can log in. But we didn't want to and couldn't force them to use this EID. It was only going to be the carrot method. Like, what is it that's going to entice people to start using digital services? And frankly, it's almost never a public sector service. You don't get too excited about declaring your taxes usually. Although it's quite motivating to get it over with, right? So now in Estonia, it's a 3-click method. So just it's a pretty fun sport in which we compete. We love declaring taxes these days because they're sort of unavoidable. Might as well just click 3 times and you're done. But it's the private sector service that's going to create value for the people. So in Estonia, common people, citizens, really started using their EID, logging into digital services when banks got on board and banks started literally teaching people how to log in with the ID card because they wanted to use this safe digital infrastructure that the government built, but people weren't embracing because they didn't understand why. So it took us quite a lot of years to get this initiative off the ground, thanks to the banks. And then,
Yeah. Well, I imagine it also takes a lot of effort to communicate the change. For example, there are very good reforms in Armenia that have been undertaken, but the people were not very excited about them. And I think as a communications professor, I think if people were told in advance or there were some trainings or some at least reasoning for why this change is happening. And it's not only like the government change, it's happening on the municipal level as well. For example, they are changing the trees that are not good anymore. But instead of communicating it in advance and showing, what the result would be and, being apologetic and saying that, guys, we ask you for some patience because in 3 years, this is the result that we're going to get. They just started cutting them. And people were like, what are you doing to our trees? Okay. So I think that these kinds of approaches or examples are very bad communication. And I think, it is like another full-time job, another initiative that should be undertaken. So can you reflect back on any communications best practices or success stories from Estonia on undertaking those reforms?
I don't remember anyone particularly advertising or trying to steer us or nudge us in the direction of let's all use digital services, because they have always been introduced as an option. You see, we still provide offline services. It's just that most people choose not to use them because over the years, with experience, we've realized that not standing in line, not asking for time off from your employer to go visit an office, all those things that actually interrupt your lifestyle so that you can communicate with the government that no one really enjoys, right? If you actually have an alternative, you are likely to look into it. Now, what I remember is that digitalization or using digital services has always been normal. Our politicians are using, e-cabinet. That was the first thing that we introduced, e-cabinet, to cut time it took our politicians to deliberate from 5 hours to 15 minutes. People love those kind of savings, right? We started talking about how this is making my life better. There were first adopters, early adopters who had the positive experience, and then kind of, it spread like a virus. That
in a good
in a good way, meaning that people wanted to try. What is it? Does it really save time? And then, of course, we incentivized people by if there's a fee involved in some sort of transaction with the state, it's going to be lower if you use online services. So people are going to want to try to figure it out. And if it's fairly easy, they're going to have a positive experience. And they're going to just get used to it, talk about it. At some point, it was fairly obvious that before even thinking how to address something where the state is involved, just Google it. There's probably going to be some sort of a website or a platform where you can do it. That was increasingly true in the 2010s and 2020s, and now everything is digital. So before you start pondering, like, how do I do that? Call your mom or grandmother to ask advice, just Google it. There's going to be a solution. And it became normal without anyone particularly, intentionally doing that. It became normal in society.
I was bragging about this interview with my to my economist friends and colleagues here, and they said, "Well, I mean, they gave me a very interesting perspective. I never thought about digital transformation as an economic benefit that the country can benefit from." I was more thinking about like the green economy side of it, so less paper, etc. But as a matter of that discussion, we understood that it leads to economic efficiencies because it saves time, saves resources. As you said, you're not asking for a time off. You are more involved in your work. You're working at that time instead of like going and standing in line, etc. And also, I mean, it should have economic impact. Did you observe that?
Absolutely. They're actually very difficult to quantify. We can measure the impact of separate services as we roll them out. We can measure in hours, and then we calculate roughly how much in monetary value that could be. But when you have an entire society digital, where you can actually measure more successfully is the quality of life. And not that you can actually measure it, because there is no way for you to measure the quality of life.
Feel it, yeah.
So we know that by using these e-signatures, digital signatures, we could roughly estimate that we save about 2% of GDP just through e-signature. So thousands of years we save in terms of like labor, because people don't have to go anywhere, don't have to take time off. But then every service is going to be on top of that. When we're talking about monetary value, a digital society is going to attract investment. It is very hard to evaluate that when you're starting, because the types of initiatives that we introduced thanks to digitalization, they were not feasible at the beginning. We had to innovate, and we did. And for example, e-residency, right, that attracts thousands, tens of thousands of entrepreneurs worldwide to use our digital infrastructure, establish companies. They are not always eligible to pay taxes in Estonia. That's okay. They still hire local people. They invest into the economy. They use local services. We basically make 12 times more with e-residency than we spend on running the program. And then the startup ecosystem, all of that. It just, digitalization is the backbone of a society that has the ability to offer so many more services and a much higher quality of life that will attract talent. You cannot quantify that. I mean, at least not my brain. I don't know what kind of formula that's going to be, but that is just a different type of life that is that definitely brings a lot of value for, I feel like, to all the participants, really.
Great. All right. So I have two more questions, and we have 5 minutes.
All right.
So my first, one of my questions is about trust. So how important is the trust component in how the system is working? Because really, if the system doesn't work, if it fails, if it's too long, etc., people are going to be like, I'm not going to be using my e-signature or doing my taxes electronically or registering my company. I was so comfortable doing it, pen and paper, in person, etc. So one failure can really lead to a huge compromising the trust. I mean, did it happen?
No, you absolutely, you have a point. Now, I got a bit stuck thinking about who would prefer going somewhere to sign something in writing when they can do it in 3 seconds online. But okay, so trust is something that you gain by the spoon and lose by the bucket, right? Estonia is in no way predisposed to be in a situation where we are, with the population generally have a relatively high trust towards the government. Now, we may not like our politicians. The trust is towards the government as sort of like a collection of institutions, right? That didn't happen overnight. And see, when the intentions are right, the intention is to design citizen-centric services for the benefit of the people. Intentions are not enough, obviously, but if it involves this iterative approach where services are constantly being approved thanks to feedback, people feel more empowered because they have a say, because now they can vote online, because now they can express their opinions through citizens' initiative portals, right? There are different ways in order to that technology is allowed to involve people in the sort of operational running of the state, sort of, right? If people have a say, then they are more likely to trust the state. If services are easy to use, not confusing, they are more likely to trust the state. If their data almost never leaks, they don't have to worry about it. And if it does leak, then the state tells them about it. They don't have to learn about a data leak from an investigative journalist publication 3.5 years later. The government tells you. Every time this happens, luckily not too often, the trust goes up. When the government says, look, there's a problem, this, or we made a mistake, this is how we're going to address it, this is what we learned, we are deeply sorry, This is, the trust goes up. And then we've been at it for more than 2 decades. So we're still working constantly on maintaining that trust and improving it. It's not an easy thing because there's a lot of misconceptions and disinformation in society, right? But we matured as a society together with digital services. To us, it's second nature. We don't even question it. It is so obvious to us that most Estonians are not sure. I mean, we're totally confused about the fact that the rest of the world doesn't live this way. It's very surprising when we move abroad and then, signing things on paper is your only choice.
Yeah. So you spoke about this algorithmic or formulaic approach, 3 clicks, for example. Is there any recipe for Armenia that you would put in a formula?
For Armenia?
For Armenia to win this e-transformation game?
I actually understand that you're already on the right track as a country, which makes me so happy because, Estonia has been an inspirational story for a lot of countries, and we are so happy to be an inspiration. It's not a copy-paste solution, but from what I understand, Armenia is already considering or even applying the same sort of steps, the necessary laying the groundwork. We're doing the groundwork. How's that in English? So creating the backbone that will support the digital society. The same way as Estonia did. Obviously, there's going to be differences, but basically continuing that journey, you're on the right track. What is required is what I think we as a government or a society must never stop is educating people and raising awareness, because even in Estonia, now everyone has computers, knows how to use them. We don't have to teach them obvious things that we did in the 1990s, early 2000s. But now we need to teach them about cyber hygiene, awareness of, how to be safe online. And it is so not obvious because these hybrid attacks and social engineering type of cyber attacks, they're getting so complicated and so difficult for people to guard against, sort of. I used to think that if you were highly educated, you're safe from whatever simplistic social engineering or phishing emails, right, that there may be. And I was very much confused because I know several people with a PhD who were scammed out of money because those people are just that good. And AI that they're using is all about numbers. And it doesn't matter how clever you are, if they catch you in a moment of weakness, you're done. So we need to keep educating people about
So
that.
education. Now, we as an educational institution, as American University of Armenia, do we have any job to do for the society in terms of educating? What do you think?
I think that the best way to sort of get people on board or educate them is leading by example. So absolutely, yeah. If your students know more about cyber hygiene, that is a great example that others will follow. So yeah, you can engage in that cyber awareness. Maybe, considering you have this lovely lab, you could do what we did. You could have a TV show type of or podcast on cybersecurity, talking in layman terms, what is cybersecurity, how to recognize phishing links, and that kind of stuff. So our TV show is mostly, obviously, for people who still watch TVs. You could address the younger population, but don't forget about the older people. They also need to know how to stay online. Especially they need to know how to stay safe online.
Great. Thank you, Petra, so much. Nice conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me.